In the endless dark of space, a river of stars flowed. This was the grand fleet of the Galactic Alliance, thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds, a vibrant, noisy caravan of countless species. But trailing at the very end, like a shadow clinging to the light, was the human contingent. Their ships were silent, dark, and utterly still. No one liked being near them. The other species, full of life and pride, often made jokes at the humans' expense. The Vork, towering insectoid beings, were particularly vocal. They hide in the back because they are weak, a Vork captain would hiss, and the bridge would erupt in clicking laughter. Even the Zealans, whose ships shone like polished jewels, found the humans' quiet demeanor unnerving, almost boring. Too quiet, too calm, too strange. But the humans never responded. They never joined the boisterous cross-fleet communications, never sent greetings or boasts. Their ships maintained a constant, low-light profile, their radios perpetually silent. They simply followed orders, holding their formation with unnerving precision. To many it looked like fear. To the proud warrior races, it looked like weakness. But to Captain Reth of the Vork flagship, it was just strange. Reth found his gaze drifting to the rear of the fleet on his main display. He watched the human ships, stark, black, utilitarian vessels, moving in perfect, silent synchronicity. No engine flares, no running lights, no chatter. They are ghosts, he murmured to his first officer. The officer chuckled. Ghosts don't win wars, Captain. Reth managed a thin smile. No, they don't. But humans seem to think they can. On a whim, he opened a channel to the human flagship. This is Captain Reth of the Vork. We're reading minimal energy signatures from your fleet. Are your systems failing? For a long moment, only static answered. Then, a voice, calm and measured, broke the silence. This is Captain Hale. Our systems are fully operational. We stay silent because it is safer. Reth leaned forward, intrigued. Safer from what? The pause that followed was longer this time, heavy with an unspoken weight. From what listens, Hale replied, and the channel was immediately cut. Hours stretched into a day cycle. The Alliance fleet pressed on, pushing toward the edge of known space. Their mission was one of exploration, to chart a mysterious dark region from which no probe or ship had ever returned. The Zalans called it the Shadow Sector. Every species had their own name for it: the empty deep, the silent veil, the mouth of nothing. It was a place where physics itself seemed to bend, where sound died and even advanced sensors grew sluggish and unreliable. The Alliance wanted answers, so they sent their finest. And trailing behind them all came the humans. Captain Hale's words echoed in Reth's mind. From what listens? What could that possibly mean? He shook his head, the gesture rattling his chitinous plates. Humans and their endless riddles. Perhaps it was just a strange cultural quirk, a way to feel important in a galaxy teeming with older, more powerful civilizations. Later that cycle, the first anomalies began. The sensors on every ship in the fleet started to register minute errors, random flickers on the screen, a soft static that hummed just at the edge of hearing. The communication lines buzzed with a low, persistent tone, as if an invisible current was flowing through them. The Zealan ships, with their hypersensitive acoustic sensors, reported hearing faint, ghostly sounds, whispers like wind whistling through a desolate canyon. It's probably just background energy waves from the sector's edge, Reth announced to his bridge crew, trying to project confidence. But as he looked closer at the tactical display, a chill ran down his spine. The human ships were already moving. Without any orders from Fleet Command, they were tightening their formation, shifting into a defensive ring around their core vessels. They moved with a swift, silent, and terrifyingly exact purpose. The joke started again on the open channels. "Look at them," a Zealan officer broadcasted, his voice dripping with amusement. "The humans think a few stray signals are going to hurt them." But Reth wasn't laughing. He saw the cold, calculated precision of their maneuver. The humans weren't scared. They were preparing. That night cycle, as most of the fleet powered down non-essential systems to conserve energy and allow crews to rest, the human ships remained active. They continued their silent, dark patrol at the rear. Inside their unlit vessels, human crews prepared for something unknown. On the bridge of the human flagship, Captain Hale stood before a completely dark main screen. His crew moved around him in near total silence, their faces illuminated only by the faint glow of their personal data pads. "The signal is getting closer," Hale stated, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. A tactical officer nodded, her expression grim. "It's following our energy trail, sir. It's locked onto the main fleet." "Does the rest of the Alliance know?" Hale asked, though he already knew the answer. "They ignored our official warning, sir. Classified it as low-priority sensor noise." Hale let out a slow, weary sigh. Of course they did. He turned, his gaze sweeping over his disciplined crew. "Activate full silent protocol. No transmissions, no external lights, no unnecessary energy output. Let them mock us. When it comes, we will be the only ones ready." Meanwhile, at the front of the fleet, Captain Reth and the other senior commanders were in a virtual meeting. Hollow images of 5 different species flickered in the conference room, all talking over each other. They debated the strange signals, arguing about the best course of action. A Zealand commander, looking flustered, suggested, "We should increase speed. Put this strange region behind us as quickly as possible." A Kath warrior, a being of rock and fury, slammed his fist on his console. "No! We are the Alliance fleet. We should confront whatever it is and destroy it." Reth listened, a growing sense of unease settling over him. He felt they were missing something crucial. "Perhaps," he said, intending it as a joke, "we should ask the humans what they think." The suggestion was met with a fresh round of laughter. "The silent ones? What could they possibly say to us?" a captain sneered. "Nothing," another replied. "Exactly," said a third, and the room once again filled with derisive noise. The laughter died abruptly. The lights on Reth's bridge flickered violently, then went out. For a single, terrifying second, the starfield outside the viewport vanished, replaced by an absolute, suffocating blackness. Every sensor, every monitor, every system went dead. And then, a voice. It came through every speaker, every comm unit, every helmet. It wasn't loud, but it was heavy, ancient, and cold. It spoke a single, chilling word. "Found." Just as suddenly as they went out, the systems blinked back to life. The lights hummed, the screens refreshed, and the stars reappeared outside. The fleet was still in formation. Everything seemed normal, except for one thing. At the extreme edge of the long-range sensors, a new contact had appeared. A shadow. It was vast, silent, and cold, absorbing all scans, reflecting no light. It was a patch of pure nothingness that was steadily, inexorably, moving toward them. Reth's vibrant exoskeleton turned a pale, ashen color. What is that?" he whispered. No one on his bridge had an answer. And then, a new light appeared on his screen. From the rear of the fleet, from the silent, dark human ships, a faint glow began to emanate. Thousands of soft, red lights flickered on across their hulls, like countless eyes opening in the dark. A new transmission cut through the rising panic on the Alliance channels. It was Captain Hale's voice, as calm and steady as ever. "All ships, stay quiet. Do not power your weapons." Reth, his own voice trembling, hailed the human flagship directly. "Captain Hale, in the name of the stars, what is that thing?" There was a long, static-filled pause. Then Hale's voice returned, laced with an ancient, human weariness. "It's what listens." In the endless dark of space, the grand fleet of the Galactic Alliance was a river of light. Thousands of ships representing hundreds of worlds blazed with color and pride. There were the towering cathedral-like vessels of the Zealands, glowing with celestial energy. There were the jagged, aggressive battlecruisers of the Kuth, bristling with weaponry. And then, far at the back, trailing the glorious procession like an afterthought, were the human ships. They were dark, silent. Their hulls absorbed the light of distant stars, giving nothing back. Being stationed near the human fleet was an unpopular duty. The other species found their silence unnerving. The Vork, a tall insectoid race known for their boisterous nature, often made them the butt of their jokes. They hide in the back because they're weak, one Vork captain would hiss over the common channel, and a chorus of clicks and whistles from other ships would signal their agreement. Even the Zelans, usually so composed and radiant, couldn't help but join the laughter. To them, humans were just boring, too quiet, too reserved, too strange. The humans, for their part, never responded. They didn't join the interspecies chatter. They never sent greetings or shared stories. Their ships kept their running lights dimmed to a bare minimum, their communication arrays cold and silent. They simply followed their orders, maintained perfect formation, and moved through the void like ghosts. To most, this behavior looked like fear. To a few, it seemed like a strange, misplaced pride. But to Captain Reth of the Vork flagship, it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. He often found himself staring at the tactical display, watching the cluster of simple black ships at the rear. They moved with a disturbing precision, a synchronized, silent dance. "They are like phantoms," he remarked to his second-in-command. The officer chuckled, a series of sharp clicks. "Phantoms don't win wars, Captain." Reth offered a thin smile. "No, they don't. But these humans seem to think they do." Unable to contain his curiosity any longer, he opened a secure channel to the human flagship. "This is Captain Reth of the Vork. We're reading minimal energy signatures from your fleet. Why do your ships remain so silent? Are your systems failing?" For a long moment, there was only the hiss of static. Reth was about to disconnect when a calm, level voice replied, "This is Captain Hale. Our systems are fully operational. We stay silent because it is safer." Reth was taken aback by the directness. Safer? Safer from what? The pause that followed was longer this time, thick with unspoken meaning. Finally, Captain Hale's voice returned, low and chilling. "From what listens?" And then the line went dead. Hours crawled by as the Alliance fleet pushed deeper, toward the edge of known space. Their mission was one of exploration, to chart a vast, dark region from which no probe or ship had ever returned. The Zelans called it the Shadow Sector. Other species had more poetic names: the Empty Deep, the Silent Veil, the Mouth of Nothing. It was a place where physics itself seemed to warp. Sound died, sensors struggled, and a profound sense of isolation crept into the heart of every crew. But the Alliance was determined to uncover its secrets, and so they sent their finest. And trailing behind them all were the humans. Captain Reth couldn't shake Hale's words. From what listens? What could possibly be out here in this absolute emptiness that would be listening? He dismissed it as human theatrics, their peculiar way of feeling important in a galaxy that had largely overlooked them. Later that cycle, the first anomalies began. The sensors on every ship in the fleet started to report small, insignificant errors, random flickers on the screen, a faint static that shouldn't exist in the void. The communication lines began to carry a low, almost subliminal hum, as if an invisible current were flowing through the space between ships. The Zelan vessels, with their highly sensitive instruments, reported hearing soft, ethereal sounds, faint whispers, like wind through a forgotten cave. "It's probably just anomalous energy waves from the sector's edge," Reth broadcasted to his concerned bridge crew. But as he zoomed in on the tactical display, he saw something that made him pause. The human ships were already moving. Without a single order being given, they were tightening their formation, pulling closer together, forming a dense, protective shield around their central command ship. They moved with that same eerie silence, a swift and precise maneuver that no one else had even considered. The mockery across the fleet comms was immediate. "Look at the humans," a Zelan officer broadcasted, their voice laced with amusement. "They think a few stray signals are going to hurt them." But Reth wasn't laughing. He watched the dark ships coalesce into a single unified bastion. The humans weren't scared. They looked Ready. During the next night cycle, as most of the fleet powered down non-essential systems to conserve energy and allow their crews to rest, the human ships did not. They remained active, moving with the fleet, their engines cold, their hulls dark. Inside the command center of the human flagship, Captain Hale stood before a completely black main screen. His crew was stationed at their posts, the only light coming from the faint glow of their individual monitors. The bridge was utterly silent. "The signal is closer," Hale said, his voice barely a whisper. A junior officer at the sensor station nodded, not turning his head. "It's following us, sir." "Does the rest of the fleet know?" Hale asked. The officer's reply was flat. "They ignored our final warning, sir. Logged it as low-priority interference." Hale let out a long, slow sigh. Of course they did. He turned to face his crew, his silhouette a solid shape against the darkness. "Activate full silent protocol. No external transmissions, no running lights. Let them mock us. When it comes, we will be the ones who are ready." Meanwhile, at the front of the fleet, Captain Reth was in a holographic conference with the leaders of the other primary species. They were debating the strange signals. A Zeelan commander, their form shimmering with agitated light, argued, "We should increase our speed. Get through this region as quickly as possible." A gruff Keith warrior slammed a fist on his console. "No, we are the Alliance. We should face whatever it is and destroy it." Reth listened, growing more weary by the minute. "Perhaps," he said with a hint of sarcasm, "we should ask the humans what they think." The other commanders erupted in laughter. "The silent ones, what could they possibly have to say?" One of them scoffed. "Nothing," another replied. "Exactly," said a third, and the laughter echoed through the virtual chamber. The laughter died in their throats as the lights on every one of their bridges flickered violently. For a single, terrifying second, the starfield outside their viewports vanished, replaced by an impenetrable blackness. Every sensor, every display, went dead. And in that moment of absolute silence and blindness, a new voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere, transmitted directly into the communication systems of every ship. It was a cold, ancient voice, a single word that landed with the weight of a dying star. "Found." And just like that, the systems flared back to life. The fleet was intact, the stars reappeared. Everything seemed normal. Except for one thing. At the extreme edge of their long-range sensors, a shadow had appeared. It was immense, a void within the void, and it was moving. Slowly, steadily, towards them. It didn't reflect light or emit any energy. It was simply there. A cold dread washed over Captain Reth. What is that?" he stammered, his voice trembling. None of his crew had an answer. And then, from the very back of the fleet, something changed. The human ships, once so dark and invisible, began to glow. Faint red lights blinked on across their hulls one by one, like 1,000 crimson eyes opening in the dark. A single, fleet-wide transmission cut through the rising panic. It was Captain Hale's voice, as calm and steady as ever. "All ships, stay quiet." Reth frantically opened a private channel. "Captain Hale, in the name of the Alliance, what is that thing?" There was a long, chilling pause. When Hale finally spoke again, his voice was grim, devoid of any emotion except for a terrible certainty. "It's what listens." In the endless dark of space, a river of stars flowed. This was the great fleet of the Galactic Alliance, thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds, a vibrant, noisy tapestry of life. Each ship was a beacon of its species, loud, proud, and full of color. But at the very end of this magnificent procession, trailing behind everyone else, flew the human ships, silent, dark, unmoving. No one liked being near them. The Vork, towering insect-like creatures, often joked about the humans. "They hide in the back because they are weak," one Vork captain would hiss, and the bridge would erupt in clicking laughter. Even the bright, shining Zeelan officers, whose ships gleamed like polished jewels, joined in. To them, humans were just boring. Too quiet, too calm, too strange. But the humans never answered. They never joined the multi-species chatter, never sent celebratory messages. Their ships kept their lights low and their radios silent. They simply followed orders, maintained perfect formation, and watched. To many, it looked like fear. To a few, it looked like arrogance. But to Captain Reth of the Vork fleet, it was just deeply unsettling. Reth often found himself watching the human ships on his main display. He saw their fleet, a collection of black, unadorned vessels moving in perfect, silent synchronicity. No engine flare, no running lights. "They are ghosts," he murmured to his second officer one cycle. The officer chuckled. "Ghosts don't win wars, Captain." Reth managed a thin smile. "No, they don't, but humans seem to think they do." On an impulse, he opened a channel to the human flagship. "This is Captain Reth of the Vork. Why do your ships remain silent? Are your primary systems failing?" For a long moment, there was only static. Then, a calm, level voice replied, "This is Captain Hale. Our systems are fully operational. We stay silent because it is safer." "Safer from what?" Reth pressed, his antennae twitching with curiosity. There was a pause that felt like an eternity. "From what listens," Hale said, and then the line went dead. Hours bled into days as the fleet pushed deeper, toward the edge of known space. Their mission was simple: explore a dark, foreboding region where no probe, no signal had ever returned. The Zelans called it the Shadow Sector. Every species had their own name for it: the empty deep, the silent veil, the mouth of nothing. It was a place where sound itself seemed to die, and even the most advanced sensors became sluggish and unreliable. But the Alliance was determined to map it. So they sent their best. And at the back, followed the humans. Reth couldn't shake Captain Hale's cryptic words. From what listens? What could that possibly mean? He dismissed it as human melodrama, their way of feeling important in a galaxy that largely ignored them. Later that day, however, things began to get strange. The sensors across the entire fleet started showing small errors, random flickers, a quiet hiss on open channels. The communication lines began to hum with a low, resonant frequency, as if something vast and invisible was brushing against them. The Zealand ships reported hearing soft, whispering sounds, like wind rushing through a deep cave. "Probably just anomalous energy waves," Reth said, trying to reassure his crew. But as he looked closer at the fleet display, a chill ran down his carapace. The human ships were already changing formation. They were moving closer together, forming a tight, protective ring around their central vessels. No one had given them that order. They just did it. Fast, silent, and with terrifying precision. The other species, of course, noticed and laughed. "Look at them," a Zelan officer broadcasted on an open channel. "They think a few harmless signals are going to hurt them." But Reth wasn't laughing. He saw the cold, calculated movements. The humans didn't look scared. They looked ready. That night cycle, as most of the fleet powered down non-essential systems to rest, the human ships kept moving, dark and cold as the void itself. Inside, the crews prepared in near-total blackness with no lights and no noise. In the command room of the human flagship, Captain Hale stood before a dark screen, his crew watching in absolute silence. "The signal is close," Hale said quietly. An officer nodded. "It's following us, sir." "Does the rest of the fleet know?" "They ignored our warning, sir. They called it human paranoia." Hale let out a slow breath. "Of course they did." He turned to his crew, his voice low but firm. "Activate full silent running. No transmissions. No external lights. Let them mock us. When it comes, we will be ready." Meanwhile, at the front of the fleet, Captain Reth and the other senior commanders were holding a virtual meeting. The leaders of 5 species appeared on the holo screens, debating what to do about the strange signals. A Zelan commander argued, "We should increase speed and leave this area immediately." A hulking Kath warrior roared in disagreement, "No, we should stand and fight whatever it is." Reth listened, growing bored. Maybe we should ask the humans, he said, a joke to lighten the mood. The others laughed. The silent ones? What will they say? Someone quipped. Nothing, another replied. Exactly, said a third, and the laughter echoed through the virtual chamber. But the laughter died in their throats as the lights on every ship flickered violently. For one heart-stopping second, the star field outside the viewports vanished, replaced by an absolute impenetrable black. Every sensor went dead. Then a cold, ancient voice slithered through every communication system on every ship, a voice that felt like it came from nowhere and everywhere at once. It spoke a single heavy word. Found. Just as suddenly, the systems came back online. The fleet was intact. The stars were back. Everything seemed normal. Except for one thing. A shadow had appeared at the far edge of the fleet's sensor range. It was massive. Silent and cold, absorbing all light and energy. It didn't reflect, it just moved. Reth's blood ran cold. What is that? He whispered. No one had an answer. The shadow grew, a patch of absolute nothingness against the sea of stars. And then, from the back of the fleet, a soft glow emerged. The human ships began to light up, faint red lights flickering on like a predator's eyes opening in the dark. A new transmission cut through the rising panic, clean and clear. It was Captain Hale's voice, calm and steady as a rock. Alliance fleet, stay quiet. Do not power your weapons. Reth, his voice trembling, managed to reply. Captain Hale, what is that thing? There was a long, chilling pause. Then Hale spoke again, his voice echoing the dread in every heart. It's what listens. The fleet drifted through the cold silence of the shadow sector. Laughter, music, all the usual noise of a living fleet. It was all gone. Now, only the low hum of engines and the faint crackle of comms filled the endless dark. Since the first mysterious signal, no one had seen the listener, but everyone could feel it. Watching, waiting. Somewhere behind them, on the bridge of his ship, Captain Reth stared at the empty radar screen. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His claws tapped a nervous rhythm on the metal armrest. Still nothing? He asked his officer. Nothing, sir. The sensors are clean. Reth exhaled slowly. Clean. That's what they said before the Zealand cruiser vanished. He looked out the viewport into the inky blackness. Every time he blinked, he thought he saw a flicker of movement. But when he looked again, it was gone. The Alliance Council had ordered a search. 3 small scout ships were sent into the dark zone behind the fleet. 1 Vork, 1 Zealand, and 1 human. Their mission, to map the region and confirm if the signal source was still following them. Reth watched the 3 ships turn and slip away into the void, their engines glowing briefly before vanishing completely. He opened his log recorder. Scout Patrol 09 launched at 0300 hours. Destination, Shadow Zone. Communication check every 15 minutes. He didn't say it out loud, but he prayed they'd come back. On the human flagship Erebus, Captain Hale stood by a window, his eyes fixed on the same direction. His scout, the Vigil, was part of that patrol. A small ship, but fast and quiet. Status of the patrol? He asked. His officer replied softly. All 3 ships reporting normal. Distance increasing. Keep the channel open, Hale commanded. For a while, everything was calm. Then, exactly 15 minutes later, the first strange thing happened. A faint static whisper crept into the comms. Not words, just a low hiss, like something breathing through dust. Source? Hale asked. The comm officer frowned. Coming from the patrol channel, sir, but all 3 beacons are still active. Filter it, Hale said. They tried, but the sound only grew louder. Then the first voice came through, shaking. It was Captain Lin from the Zealand ship Aurora. Command, this is Aurora. We are reading motion ahead. Could be a debris field. Adjusting course. Reth heard it too and leaned forward. Debris field. Confirm. There was no answer. Only static. 5 minutes later, the human scout Vigil transmitted a short coded burst. It was a distress code, simple and chilling. It's not debris. It's moving. The bridge of every ship went silent. Hale's eyes hardened. "Get them back," he ordered. "We're trying, sir. They're not responding." Suddenly, the Vork captain's voice broke through the static, filled with panic. "Something's here. It's huge." A deafening burst of white noise filled the speakers, and then nothing. The signal was gone. The entire fleet waited in suffocating silence. Seconds turned into minutes. All 3 scout ships had vanished without a trace. Reth slammed his claws on the console. "We can't lose 3 ships. Find them." But the sensors showed only cold, empty space. Then, a soft tone beeped. An incoming message from the humans. Not video, not even sound. Just text. "Do not search. It's close." Reth froze. "What do they mean, close?" he whispered, looking out the main viewport. And then he saw it. A ripple. Like a wave in water, but there was no water here. The stars themselves seemed to bend as something massive, something unseen moved between them. The bridge lights on Hale's ship went dim and red. He gave quiet orders. "All human ships, defensive grid theta. No comms, prepare silent weapons." His officer hesitated. "Sir, if we power weapons, the others will see." "They'll see," Hale said, his voice flat. "But they won't understand." One by one, the human ships shifted into a strange, ritualistic shield around the fleet. Reth opened a private line. "Captain Hale, what is happening?" Hale's voice came through low and steady. "The patrol is gone, and it wasn't an attack. It was feeding." Reth blinked. "Feeding? On what?" "Energy, sound, maybe life itself. We don't fully know, but when we first found it years ago, it took whole colonies." Reth's claws trembled. "And you didn't tell anyone?" Hale's eyes looked dead on the screen. "We tried. No one believed us. Just like now." Chaos erupted across the fleet's comms, shouting, arguing, panic rising. And then, the signal came again. Louder this time. A deep, vibrating thump, thump, thump. That resonated through every ship's hull. Every light flickered. Hale whispered, "It's feeding again." The radar began to blink. One ship, then another, disappearing from the screen like dying stars. Reth watched in horror as the outer formation dissolved. He cried out, "What do we do, Hale?" The human captain looked at him with cold eyes. "Stay silent," he said, "or you'll be next." When the humming finally stopped, the fleet counted its losses. 6 ships gone. Yet through it all, the human ship stood untouched, silent, and calm. Reth sat in the dark, staring at the empty radar. He whispered to himself, "How can they face this without fear?" Hale's voice came through one last time, soft and haunting. "They do fear, but they learn to live with it." A pause. "Now you must too." The patrol vanished into the void, and an unnatural silence fell over the fleet. The usual hum of 1,000 ships navigating the cosmos was gone. No one spoke. No one dared to laugh. The endless dark of space, once just a backdrop, now felt heavy, alive, and breathing right alongside them. Ships that had once paraded their vibrant colors now dimmed their lights, hiding in the shadows. Even the most boisterous species aboard began to whisper. Noise had become the enemy. On the bridge of his flagship, Captain Reth stared at the radar, his eyes locked on the slowly blinking green dots. Each dot represented a ship, a fragile bubble of life adrift in an ocean of darkness. 3 ships, he whispered, the words catching in his throat. Just gone. His second officer, a young Vork, shifted nervously. "Sir, the crew is on edge. They're saying something is hunting us." Reth's frown deepened. "It is hunting us," he conceded, the chilling realization settling in his bones. The humans were right. He could still hear Captain Hale's cold, clipped warning. "Stay silent or you'll be next." For the first time in his long career, Reth obeyed another species without question. But on the human ships, the atmosphere was entirely different. They moved with a calm, unnerving precision, as if they'd rehearsed this very scenario for years. There was no panic, no shouting. Every order was given and received in silence, a language of hand signals, light taps on shoulders and short, sharp nods. Aboard the human flagship, the Erebus, Captain Hale watched his own sensor screen. It showed nothing, a perfect, empty void. But Hale knew better. He could feel it, a predatory presence lurking just beyond their sensors, a shadow behind the fleet. His first officer's voice was a low murmur. "Sir, the others are starting to lose their discipline. Should we share our sensor readings? Let them know what we suspect?" Hale shook his head, his gaze never leaving the screen. "No. Fear will spread faster than any sound. They need to see calm, not the truth." The officer hesitated. "And what about us?" Hale finally looked away from the monitor, his eyes finding the inky blackness outside the main view screen. "We stay silent," he said, his voice absolute. "Always." The fleet tried to pick up the pace, a desperate attempt to outrun the encroaching dread. But it made no difference. The darkness around them seemed to stretch, becoming an endless, suffocating blanket. And the deeper they went, the stranger things became. Strange, phantom lights flickered at the edge of their vision, ghostly whispers crackled through the comms, speaking in languages no one understood. One ship reported seeing shapes crawling across their viewports, shadows clinging to the glass. Another claimed the very air in their life support was growing thicker, heavier, as if the hull itself was being squeezed by an unseen force. Every hour, a new wave of panic would erupt somewhere in the fleet. Reth did his best to maintain order. "Focus on your stations. Ignore the rumors," he'd command, but even he could hear the lack of conviction in his own voice. Soon, the comms channels devolved into chaos. Captains from different ships screamed over each other, their terrified voices breaking through layers of static. "Something just touched my ship," one yelled. "We're losing primary power," shouted another. I can hear breathing in the vents." Hale listened to the cacophony in cold silence. He made no move to intervene. He had seen this pattern before. Fear always came first. The noise came next. And then, the feeding. He turned to his officer. "Prepare the signal jammers. Isolate our frequency." The officer nodded. "Yes, sir." He paused. "And if they call for our help?" Hale's face was a mask of stone, unreadable in the dim light of the bridge. "We can't save them if they keep shouting into the dark." The hours crawled by. The fleet grew quieter once more, but this time it was not by choice. One by one, ships went dark. Their power systems failed. Their voices faded from the comms and their signals winked out of existence. Each time it happened, the human crews watched in silence. They didn't cheer. They didn't mourn. They simply observed, recording every detail with detached efficiency. Finally, a private channel flickered to life on Hale's console. It was Reth. He looked tired, broken, a captain who had lost his fleet. "Captain," he said, his voice raspy, "tell me what to do." Hale's eyes, shadowed and calm, met Reth's. "Turn off everything," he said, his voice low and steady. "Your engines, your lights, all comms, all sound. Let space swallow you whole. Let it pass over you." Reth swallowed, the motion visible even on the grainy view screen. "And if it doesn't pass?" Hale's answer was a whisper, a final, chilling piece of advice. "Then pray it doesn't find you first." The darkness outside grew thicker, more absolute, until it felt almost solid. The distant stars seemed to fade, consumed by something vast and impossibly ancient. In that profound, suffocating silence, even fear itself stopped making noise, and through it all the human ships held their formation, small, steady red lights blinking in a perfect, silent rhythm. They weren't fearless, they were simply ready. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories from the void. We'll see you in the next one. The fleet drifted through an endless, silent black. No stars, no signals, no sound. It felt as if space itself had died. For hours, an unsettling stillness reigned. Then a single, sharp flicker of lights across several ships shattered the calm. Everyone froze. "Power spike?" Captain Reth asked, his voice tight. His officer's eyes were glued to the screen. "No, sir. Something absorbed the energy." Reth repeated the word, a tremor in his voice. "Absorbed?" "Yes, Captain, like it was drinking it." And then, in the suffocating darkness, something began to move. At first it resembled smoke drifting across the void, but it grew darker, thicker, stretching and coiling like a living storm. It wasn't one shape, but many. Each wave of shadow moving like liquid night, twisting around invisible bones, completely swallowing the stars behind it. On the bridge of the human ship, the Erebus, Captain Hale stood impassive. His crew watched in tense silence as the radar lit up with faint, ghost-like pulses. "It's not chasing anymore," an officer whispered, her voice barely audible. Hale nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the view screen. "No, it's hunting." The fleet tried to hold its breath, to become invisible, but fear made silence an impossible command. A Zealand officer's panicked voice crackled over the comms. "It's coming straight for us. What is that thing?" "Hold your fire!" Reth shouted back desperately. "Do not—" But it was too late. A brilliant beam of plasma shot out from one of the terrified ships, striking the dark mass. The beam vanished without a trace, like a stone dropped into a bottomless lake. In response, the darkness surged forward, crashing toward the firing ship like a tidal wave. In a terrifying instant, the ship's lights blinked out, one last flash and then— gone. No explosion, no debris, only a profound, chilling silence. Reth's crew could only stare in horror. It's erasing them," someone stammered. Reth's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. "Get me Captain Hale," he roared. The screen flickered to life, showing Hale's unnervingly calm face. Reth's voice was a torrent of panic and rage. "You see this? It's devouring our ships." Hale's reply was quiet, almost a whisper. "Yes, that's what it does." "Then fight it. You have weapons, don't you?" Hale's eyes narrowed, cold and hard. "Weapons make noise." Reth slammed his fist on the console in frustration. "Then we'll all die." "Not if you listen," Hale countered. "Stay behind us, and stay silent." The human ships began to move. No lights, no engine flares, just a slow gliding motion like ghosts drifting through deep water. They formed a wide, protective circle in front of the main fleet. To the aliens, it looked like sheer madness, but to the humans, it was a shield wall. Hale turned to his crew, his voice low and steady. "Activate Theta defense grid." Soft red lights blinked once across the ship as hidden panels slid open along the hull, revealing long, dark cannons that made no sound. These weren't plasma casters or laser emitters. They were kinetic, old, simple, and silent. "Load magnetized slugs," Hale commanded. The crew worked with a practiced wordless efficiency. The ancient human weapons hummed quietly, powered by gravity and the principle of silence. Outside, the darkness drew closer, its tendrils spreading across space like spilled oil, touching the very edges of the human formation. Every other ship went dark, hiding in their shadow. Reth watched, his breath caught in his throat. "What are they doing?" His officer's voice was filled with awe. I think they're preparing to attack." "But there's no sound," Reth whispered. "No light. How—" And then it happened. Without warning, the human ships fired. No flash, no deafening blast. Just pure, silent motion. Thousands of slugs tore through the dark, invisible to the eye, each one carrying a potent magnetic pulse, a wave of silent, deadly, kinetic force. The darkness shuddered violently. The stars flickered back into view as the waves of shadow twisted and recoiled, pulling away from the fleet. A deep, Low vibration echoed through space. Not a sound to be heard, but a pressure to be felt in your bones. The aliens watched in stunned disbelief. "They're hurting it," one of them whispered. Reth's heart pounded against his ribs. "How can they fight something we can't even see?" Hale's voice came through the comm one last time, a final lesson. "You don't fight it with sound," he said. "You fight it with silence." For a brief, blessed moment, the shadow retreated, and the stars reappeared. The fleet could finally breathe. But Hale didn't relax. He watched the radar, his jaw tight. "It's not over," he murmured to himself. That was only a fragment. Reth overheard him, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. A fragment? Then where's the rest of it? Hale looked out the window into the infinite hungry black. "It's coming," he said. "And next time it won't just move. It will consume." For long, agonizing minutes the void held its breath. The stars, once brilliant, now shimmered with a timid light, as if terrified to be seen. The allied alien fleet hung in the silent darkness, engines humming low, lights dimmed to a whisper. Every soul aboard waited, everyone hoped. But the humans remained still. On the bridge of the human flagship, the Erebus, Captain Hale's eyes were locked on the radar. The faint red dot of the shadow lingered. It was retreating, but it wasn't gone. His first officer broke the silence, his voice a hushed whisper. "Sir, it's pulling back." Hale gave a slow, deliberate nod. "No, it's only waiting." He turned his gaze to the tactical screen. "Status of weapons?" "Charged and stable, sir. Railguns are ready. Nuclear payloads are armed." "Good," Hale said, his voice soft but laced with iron. "Let's remind it what fear feels like." Across the human formation, a chilling transformation began. Dim red lights flickered to life inside the ships, casting a steady cold glow. Metal plates shifted with a low groan as armor panels slid open, revealing something ancient. Dozens of massive cannons emerged, their long barrels dark and heavy. The other fleets had abandoned such primitive weapons centuries ago. They were loud, brutal, and crude, but humanity had kept them, for things that didn't bleed and for things that didn't scream. The other species watched in stunned awe. "What are they doing?" a Zalan captain stammered over the shared comms. The wise alien, Reth, answered quietly, his voice filled with a strange reverence. "They're preparing to fight." "With bullets?" Reth's eyes were fixed on the screens, a sense of unease creeping over him. "Not bullets," he corrected. "History." Just then the shadow began to move again. It stretched across the void, growing wider, darker, more absolute than before. The stars vanished once more, swallowed whole by an encroaching sea of black. As the advanced sensors of the alien ships failed one by one, raw fear took hold. Alien captains screamed through the comms, their voices cracking with panic. "It's back! It's surrounding us! What do we do?" Reth tried desperately to calm them. "Stay behind the humans. Don't make any noise." But it was too late. Panic was a weed that had taken firm root. Engines flared. Lights blinked erratically, and that was all the opening the shadow needed. It surged forward, a silent, ravenous wave of smoke and fire, and swallowed the first row of alien ships. There was no explosion, no screams, just a single horrifying pulse, like the universe itself taking a sharp, deep breath. Every ship it touched went instantly dark, silent, and cold. Reth cried out, his voice raw with despair. "We're losing them!" Then he saw it. The human ships were moving, not retreating, advancing. Captain Hale's command cut through the chaos, calm and steady. "All units, engage theta pattern, target density center. Fire on my mark." A soft chime echoed through the Erebus's bridge. Then, "Mark." The void exploded. Thousands of railguns fired at once. Not with plasma, not with light, but with pure, unadulterated force. Silent, invisible, unstoppable. The shockwaves ripped through the darkness, tearing massive chunks of the shadow apart. Invisible matter shattered and the stars flickered back into existence. To the onlookers, it was as if the night itself was breaking apart. The alien crews watched, utterly speechless. Each human shot struck with surgical precision, every volley perfectly timed. And with every impact, the darkness screamed. Not a sound that could be heard, but a vibration that could be felt. A deep, soul-shaking rumble that made the very hulls of their ships tremble. "It's hurting," someone shouted in disbelief. Reth stared, his mind reeling. They're pushing it back." But the shadow did not yield easily. It twisted and writhed, reshaping itself, lashing out with long, black tendrils toward the human formation. One tendril struck a smaller human ship, crushing it instantly into a silent wreck. Hale clenched his fists, his knuckles white. "Fire again! Full payload!" The Erebus opened its lower deck, releasing a cluster of glowing orbs, old human nuclear warheads. The other species gasped in horror. "They're using atomic weapons?" Reth whispered. "Those were banned for centuries." Hale's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "We never forgot how." The nukes flew silently into the black maw. A moment later, space itself flashed white. The explosion was soundless, but its light was so intense it burned across every sensor, blinding the entire fleet. When their vision returned, the shadow was gone. Only drifting fragments of dark mist remained, fading slowly into nothing. Silence, absolute and profound, filled the comms. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Reth opened a private line. "Captain Hale," he said softly. What was that thing?" Hale didn't answer right away. He stared out the view screen, his face an unreadable mask. "We don't know what it calls itself," he said at last. "But we call it the Listener." "And you've fought it before?" Hale nodded slowly. "On the very edge of our solar system, a long, long time ago. It wiped out colonies. We learned to live in silence after that." He turned to face Reth on the comm screen, his eyes cold but calm. "And now you understand why." Reth swallowed hard, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. "You saved us." Hale looked away, toward the silent graves of broken ships glowing faintly in the endless night. "No," he said. "We bought time. It never truly dies." Across the fleet, the remaining captains whispered their thanks to the humans. And for the first time, no one mocked them. The silence they once laughed at had just saved them all.